So this week is Qualcomm's Tech Summit, this annual event where they announce new smartphone SoCs. In the past, it's been new compute SoCs. And this year, there's going to be a focus on automotive. That's the video I was expecting to record today. However, as I woke up, news is breaking from the land of Qualcomm and Arm and lawsuits. I previously did a video on the Qualcomm versus Arm lawsuit in which I mentioned twice by both companies. However, this is kind of orthogonal to that because that lawsuit and the hearing for that is being postponed until December. But as I'm recording this, ARM has officially cancelled Qualcomm's architecture license, or at least submitted the fact that it is going to be cancelled. Let's go into detail. What's your minimum specification? So in general, ARM sells two types of licenses. You have the Architecture License Agreement, or ALA, and then you have the standard Core Architecture Agreement when you license some of the cores. Over the last, I guess, 2 years, ARM has been changing the way they're monetizing those licenses. So not only do you monetize on a core basis for the core you're using and how many cores you use inside design, but it looks like they're trying to pivot to getting a percentage of the final product as well as part of the way they're generating revenue in the future. Now, with the architecture license, the point of the architecture license is that you can go and take the ARM instruction set, you can design a core however you want, so you can build your own microarchitecture, you can bring in outside IP into it, and you can add instructions as well into the architecture to customize it for your use case. Apple does this very well with the M series of cores. They take their architecture license and they've built a full stack of cores because they own the full ecosystem to enable it, and they get the benefits therein. They don't need to take off-the-shelf ARM cores in order to do that. Now, Qualcomm has historically had an ARM architecture license. Back in the day, with the Crate version of their mobile SoCs, they developed their own cores. They eventually went back to ARM's standard cores because they found out that they were just on a better cadence and offered better performance, power, and efficiency. Now, ARM's architecture license has a little bit of nuances that isn't necessarily obvious on the package on as you hear it. Typically, ARM's architecture licenses are valid for a given vertical market. So if you get an architecture license for the embedded market, you can only design cores for the embedded market. If you get it for the SoC market, then you get it specifically for the smartphone SoC market. If you get an architecture license for the enterprise market, then you can only build enterprise class SoCs. So herein lies the rub. About 4 years ago now, Qualcomm acquired Nuvia, an ARM architecture licensee that was building server class cores. It's a topic we've actually covered a lot on this channel. They bought the company for $1 billion, and the whole point of that acquisition was to essentially, let's use the team to build new cores for notebooks, for smartphones, to essentially beat the rest of the market in that sort of stuff. One of the issues with that arrangement is the state of the architecture licensing. Now, it was widely perceived that that acquisition meant that Qualcomm acquired all the people and all the IP that had been part of Nuvia up to that point. Qualcomm states that essentially that IP they kind of ring-fenced, and they've used the team to build a new set of cores specifically for compute and smartphone and automotive. Now, it's been, like I say, 4 years since the acquisition, and we now have the first generation of those cores into the market with Orion in the Snapdragon X Elite in the notebooks. And as of this week, Qualcomm has announced Snapdragon 8 Elite, which is their first all big core using their custom core design for smartphones. That's technically called Orion Gen 2. And again, this is what the video would have been about if this hadn't happened this morning. Now, It has widely been perceived by Arm that the architecture license that Qualcomm has and that Nuvia had were A, not compatible, and B, not sufficient for Qualcomm to go down this route. And as a result, they filed the lawsuit. Now, with the announcement of Orion Gen 2 in the smartphone this week, Arm has now officially filed notice to Qualcomm that not only have they cancelled Nuvia's license several months ago, they're actually cancelling Qualcomm's architecture license now. So this means essentially the ability for Qualcomm to create any custom ARM cores should be done and dusted. Now, there are some stipulations here. And I did reach out to Arm for comment, and Arm just said, we're not commenting. The way these agreements work is that Arm has to give 60 days notice. It's not clear if today, when the news broke, that the 60 days has started or the 60 days now end. There has been some commentary online that it's fortuitous that it's the same week as Qualcomm Tech Summit. But also, now that Orion is in smartphone, this is where the big money potential is going to be. Now, Arm has different states, different various architecture levels. Most of us will know V8 and V9. Orion cores are V8.7. They're not V9 like the newest generation, and there may be some consideration in the licensing agreement between V8 and V9. So it's clear that Qualcomm hasn't necessarily acquired a V9 license, even though I'm under the impression that the stuff Nuvia was working on was V9. And we're now in this situation where Qualcomm is undoubtedly pissed off at all this. This is essentially, they feel like it's Arm is taking the opportunity to try and dig their heels in, even though they have this kind of orthogonal legal battle going on. Does it mean that Qualcomm has to stop selling this SoC, or that there will be a future injunction against Qualcomm selling this SoC? Unsure right now. What is clear is that Qualcomm is Arm's biggest client by revenue. So what they're saying to their biggest customer is, you can't do what you're doing. And some of the market has basically seen this and gone, what is Arm doing? My thought here, and this is not financial advice, but aside from Qualcomm, Arm has has revenue coming in from Apple, from Amazon, from the cloud providers, from MediaTek, from Samsung. They've got a lot of clients out there, and okay, Qualcomm may be number one, but even if Qualcomm went to zero, is that much a bigger hit to Arm? And my point of view is, Arm clearly sees a future where Qualcomm isn't the biggest revenue earner for them. So in terms of Bloomberg's essentially scoop on this from Ian King, I won't show the article because it is behind a paywall, but they basically go through the fact that Qualcomm sells hundreds of millions of smartphone processors. Now, admittedly, Snapdragon X Elite is going to be in the high end basically the high end of the stack. It's still, a considerable amount of Qualcomm's revenue in terms of the whole smartphone space. The Bloomberg article does go into the legal fight that Arm and Qualcomm are currently in for breach of contract and trademark infringement in 2022. And Qualcomm is saying that, it's that Arm is trying to strong arm a long-time partner. And to quote, "It appears to be an attempt to disrupt the legal process, and its claim for termination is completely baseless. We are confident that Qualcomm's rights under its agreement with Arm will be affirmed." And then it goes into Nuvia and the agreement and the trust, and goes into the fact that Arm, under the newest management, under Rene Haas, is essentially being, more aggressive and encroaching on what its traditional customers are doing by providing, I'm not sure if you've seen, but Arm is now offering essentially more complete turnkey solutions for smartphone vendors, for the enterprise market, for cloud providers. The idea being that Arm makes most of your SoC and you add in an NPU and some other things. And that's how essentially Arm will generate revenue going forward. I want to highlight an article here from Irrational Analysis. over on Substack, who's calling it Arm's Chernobyl moment. And I've seen this actually quoted by a number of few people that I trust. And reading through, it's more of a fight, a take on the financials of what's happening going on here. On the Substack, it basically pivots to say, Chernobyl was a massive disaster. Is this going to be a massive disaster for Arm as a result? So in the Substack, it talks about the impact to Qualcomm, talking about how the stock is unlikely to tank. However, the legal battle, is instructive. Here, they expect that Arm is going to win that, and if Arm would get an injunction against Qualcomm, then it would be devastating because the revenue would go to zero overnight. As the trial is set to start in December, that's unlikely to happen. With Arm, in this case, it's being described as a devastating self-own. Every customer is going to start working on alternatives to Arm with vigor if this is the way Arm is going to react to its biggest customers. In this case, Nvidia and Apple are actually mentioned as being excluded, partly because Apple is such a massive player in the Arm ecosystem, and Nvidia, since the attempted acquisition, has a 10-year license, I believe. So why has Arm done this? It's described here as that the original theory was that the new Snapdragon Elite smartphone chips were going to hit Arm's upcoming quarterly result and guide. Qualcomm is Arm's largest customer by royalty revenue, and the previous smartphone chip, which is a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, used Arm V9 Cortex cores under the standard licensing agreement called the TLA. Going from a V9 TLA to a V8 ALA, so this is the architecture license agreement using the Arm V8 based Orion cores, is a double royalty hit. And based on public information and his own research, the royalty rate per chip would actually decrease around 2%. But a quarter of two of misses can't possibly justify the radioactive hellfire Arm has unleashed. Now, Qualcomm again has announced the new architecture in the new chip, up to 30% faster CPU performance and 57% less power. That's comparing a notebook chip versus a smartphone chip, and Orion V1 versus Orion V2. Orion V2 appears to be a clean sheet design by the Nuvia team after they joined Qualcomm. If true, this implies the CPU IP is theoretically not covered in the original lawsuit. So there are two orthogonal legal questions. Is Nuvia's IP transferable and valid under Qualcomm's architecture license? And does Arm have the right to cancel Qualcomm's architecture license due to breach of contract? So the point here, Arm is arguing that Qualcomm is taking IP from the Nuvia acquisition and using it in these chips where they weren't expected to do so. Presumably, Qualcomm are not morons. Plenty of smart people on both sides here. They probably sequestered all Nuvia IP and started a clean slate design somewhere in 2021. Orion V2 launching now, or realistically January 2025 is when the devices are going to come to market, would match a typical semiconductor product lifecycle. Arm seems to have realized this. They have plenty of discovery documents. Winning the lawsuit is now a moot point for Arm. So what if another $200 million worth of laptop chips with Orion V1 are violating license terms? Tens of billions of dollars worth of smartphone chips with Orion V2 are going to ship next year at the lower Arm V8 architecture license royalty rate. Arm has apparently decided that the legal question of Nuvia IP doesn't matter anymore, showcasing that does Arm have the right to cancel due to breach of contract is the key to their strategy going forward. And the uptick here, as mentioned on the Substack, is that this is heaven for RISC-V. I posted a video yesterday about new RISC-V profile standards being ratified. A little bit late, but they're here now. But seriously, today, I agree here. For RISC-V, adopting the standard at the same time that Arm is basically saying to its largest customer and to its market, yeah, we're coming after you. Like I say, I've reached out to Arm and I asked a couple of questions. There's no official response on this. If RISC-V had it all together, and RISC-V International, it's a large committee with 80 working groups and 16,000 developers. It's not an agile arrangement in the industry. Will it jump on this? Not particularly. I am seeing some stuff coming out of RISC-V Summit, which is also this week, such as Sci5 has a new development board. Hopefully get to talk about that soon. I'm actually meeting with their new PR person who's ex-Intel later this week, so hopefully some more news on that. However, what we're seeing here is potential major disruption to the smartphone market. If Qualcomm's architecture license essentially is revoked fully and dead, and these two basically battle it to the hilt in the courts, who's going to end up losing most is very much likely going to be Qualcomm, but also everybody who relies on Qualcomm devices in their smartphones. The last video I did about smartphone SoCs was actually about MediaTek's Dimensity 9300 and their all-core design. The new Snapdragon X Elite is an all big core design. So there's a lot of consistency happening in this space, and I hoped there'd be lots of competition. So we're going to see exactly what happens over the next 2 to 4 weeks, especially as we go into the financial week, a couple of weeks where all the companies are disclosing all their financials for the latest quarter, and how the industry essentially reacts to what's going on here. It's a bit of a mess. There has been suggestion, this is timely because of it's in the middle of Qualcomm's Tech Summit, and whether this signifies the start of that 60-day notice period or it's actually the end of the 60-day notice period means that both companies are going to have to likely respond publicly in some way. Like I say, Qualcomm already has a statement out. Arm is refusing to comment at this point, but we'll see, especially as the other situation, the other lawsuit starts here in December, and we'll get to see more about how that comes out. Now, I'm all one for innovation in this industry, getting people architecture licenses to develop interesting cores and do interesting things. It has been pointed out to me on a number of occasions that I'm just interested in the silicon, that to me the economics don't matter. And to a certain extent, people are right. I do understand that in order for these things to ever work at scale, they have to be financially viable. However, Arm's been around for 3 decades at this point. They have a multitude of customers, and okay, they're strong arming one into paying more, and that one is basically saying you're going to cut into our margin significantly. Yeah, it's going to be a battle here. I definitely want new interesting silicon. I actually have an interview with Gerard Williams from Hot Chips still in the pipeline. Hopefully get that out to you relatively soon, especially on the back of Tech Summit. And maybe, possibly in the future, given that I've actually met up with Rene Haas a couple of times, we can get him on for an interview as well to see where he sees the market going forward. They did predict that by the end of the decade, there'll be 40 to 50% ARM chips in mobile devices and laptop devices. I wonder how much of that is going to be true if they're putting the reins on Qualcomm on some of their devices. I don't know. We'll see. You've probably got comments on this. Let me know down in the video description and video comments what you think is going on. Yeah, I'm not a fan of these legal battles. I'm more of a purist here. My minimum specification is ultra pure silicon. If you like this content, there are multiple ways to support the channel. You can like and subscribe this video, and many thanks for doing so. There's also Patreon, which gives you access to our Discord. There's a merchandise store and a newsletter, links in the description. For all of you who do contribute, thank you. You are keeping me well fed.